I'm 79 years old, and I need to say something I avoided saying out loud for most of my life. Sex doesn't just slow down after 40 or 50 or 60. For a lot of people, it disappears in a way that feels almost rude. And if you're not paying attention, it takes other things with it. I'm not telling this because I want anyone's approval. I'm old. Most of my friends are either gone or so tired they don't call much anymore. I'm telling it because when you get to my age, you start seeing which parts of your life were solid and which parts were just habit. Right now I live alone in a small place that's too quiet. I can go an entire day without touching another person, not in a sexual way. I mean not touching a hand, not leaning against someone in the kitchen. Nothing. At night I hear my own breathing and the refrigerator turning on and off. It's not tragic. It's just the truth. When I was younger, I thought sex was like youth itself. Something you had and then one day you didn't, and that was that. I didn't understand it was also a kind of language. And when you stop speaking a language with someone, you don't just lose the words. You lose the ease. In my 20s, I was clumsy but hungry for life. I worked days at a printing shop, came home with ink on my fingers, and my wife would laugh at the smell on my shirt. We weren't rich. We had a narrow bed, cheap sheets, and a little fan that rattled in the summer. But we reached for each other without planning it. Then children came, a mortgage, more hours at work. I moved into management, which sounds better than it was. It was mostly staying late and pretending not to be tired. I started to think of sex as something we did when everything else was finished. But nothing is ever finished, is it? In our 40s it changed. Not because we stopped loving each other. We were still a good team. But life got crowded. Her mother got sick. One of the kids struggled in school. My back started acting up. I'd come home and sit in my chair like I'd earned the right to be unreachable. She would brush her teeth and put on lotion in the bathroom, and I would stay in the living room, watching the late news, half listening, half dozing. Sometimes she'd come out in her nightgown and stand there like she was deciding something. I know now what she was deciding, whether to ask me to come to bed with her or to spare herself the small embarrassment of being turned down. I didn't see it as turning her down. I saw it as being tired. I saw it as being responsible. I had to get up early. I had a big meeting. I had a headache. All the reasonable things you can say to yourself. And in our 50s, her body changed. Menopause, hot flashes, dryness, moods that came and went like weather. She didn't talk about it much. She was from a generation that swallowed discomfort and called it manners. I could have asked her. I could have learned how to be gentle in a different way. Instead, I waited for her to get back to normal, like she was a machine that had stalled. My own body wasn't a loyal employee either. Erections weren't automatic anymore. Sometimes they didn't show up at all, and I felt embarrassed and angry, like I'd been cheated. I didn't tell her that, not plainly. I made jokes. I got quiet. I stayed up later. I acted like I didn't care. That's the part people don't like to admit. It isn't only the physical problem. It's the pride, the silence. The way a man can turn his shame into distance and call it peace. We stopped having sex regularly. Then we stopped having it at all. Not with a big fight, not with some dramatic betrayal. It just slipped away. Weeks became months. Months became that unspoken thing where you don't even try, because trying would mean you might fail, and failing would mean you'd have to look at each other honestly. The slow cost was in the small moments. I remember one Saturday morning. The kids were grown and out of the house. The sun was coming through the blinds. She sat on the edge of the bed and said very quietly, "Do you still want me?" I laughed like an idiot. Not a cruel laugh, but a nervous one. I said, "Of course." And then I got up and started making coffee. I thought I'd answered her. I hadn't. I'd left her sitting there with her question still in her hands. After that, we became roommates who loved each other. That's what people say when they want it to sound harmless. It isn't harmless. You can love someone and still starve them. The turning point for me wasn't a lecture or a book or some sudden insight. It was a hospital room. She had a stroke at 68. Not a dramatic collapse in the grocery store, just a bad morning where her words came out wrong and her right hand wouldn't cooperate with the buttons on her blouse. In the hospital there were tubes and monitors, and her hair was flat against her head like a child's. I held her left hand, the one that still squeezed back, and I realized I had spent years treating her like there would always be another season, another weekend, another night when we'd feel like it. After the stroke, she came home different. She could still smile, still laugh at a joke if you told it slowly, but something private in her had gone. The part that reached, the part that flirted, the part that risked being wanted. We never had sex again. Not because we couldn't physically. There are ways, if you're willing. It was because the door had been closed so long, it didn't open anymore. We were tender in other ways. I bathed her. I rubbed lotion into her legs. I helped her dress. That kind of care is intimate, yes, but it's not the same as being chosen by someone who is also choosing. She died 3 years later, in her own bed, while I was in the kitchen heating soup. I came back in and she was already gone. No words at the end, no final clearing of the air, just a stillness that made the room feel bigger than it should have. What can't be fixed is not the sex. I want to be clear about that. At 79, I'm not sitting here aching for some athletic version of myself. What can't be fixed is all the times she reached for me in ordinary ways, and I treated it like an interruption. The hard truth about sex after 40 or 50 or 60 is that it doesn't survive on autopilot. It doesn't survive on "we're fine." It doesn't survive on being tired every night and assuming the other person will understand. And another truth, maybe the hardest one. When it fades, it can take your tenderness with it if you let it. You can still be kind, you can still be loyal, but the warmth between you can cool so slowly you don't notice until you're standing in the kitchen alone, listening to the refrigerator. If you're younger than me, and you're still sharing a bed with someone, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm just going to tell you what I wish I'd understood. It wasn't about frequency. It was about not letting shame drive the car. It was about asking simple questions while you still can. It was about touching on purpose, not only in passing. And if it meant something to you to hear an old man say this plainly, you can leave a comment, not for the algorithm, just so I know I'm not the only one who waited too long to speak. I don't have a big ending for this. Tomorrow I'll wake up, make my coffee, and the day will go on the way days do at this age. I loved my wife. I believe she loved me too. I just wish I had loved her out loud, with my hands and my time, while she was still here to feel it.